The first reading is from Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. The northern tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali experienced the gloom of defeat by Assyrian military forces, but they are assured that their condition will be reversed when God makes a light-filled appearance. The joy they will experience will resemble celebrations of great harvests, because God will deliver them from everything that diminishes or opposes them. There will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time, the Lord brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he will make glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. The psalm is Psalm 27, verses 1 and 4 through 9. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom then shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? One thing I ask of the Lord, one thing I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to seek God in the temple. For in the day of trouble, God will give me shelter, hide me in the hidden places of the sanctuary, and raise me high up on a rock. Even now my head is lifted up above my enemies who surround me. Therefore I will offer sacrifice in the sanctuary, sacrifices of rejoicing. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Hear my voice, O Lord, when I call. Have mercy on me and answer me. My heart speaks your message. Seek my face. Your face, O Lord, I will seek. Hide not your face from me. Turn not away from your servant in anger. Cast me not away. You have been my helper. Forsake me not, O God of my salvation. The second reading is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 10 through 18. Paul calls on the Corinthians to end their dissensions and share the unified outlook for the gospel. Discord arises when we forget that we belong not to human leaders or institutions, but to Christ. Indeed, the unifying word of the cross of Christ is the center of the gospel and the power of God's salvation. Now I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you be in agreement and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be united in the same mind and the same purpose. For it has been reported to me by Chloe's people that you are in quarrels among you, my brothers and sisters. What I mean is that each of you says, I belong to Paul, or I belong to Apollos, or I belong to Cephas, or I belong to Christ. Has Christ been divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized under the name of Paul? I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, so that no one can say that you were baptized in my name. I did baptize also the household of Stephanas. Beyond that, I do not know whether I baptized anyone else. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to proclaim the gospel, and not with eloquent wisdom, so that the cross of Christ might not be emptied of its power. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Here ends the word.
Our gospel this morning is Matthew chapter 4, verses 12 through 23. Glory Glory to you, O Lord. Now when Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew to Galilee. He left Nazareth and made his home in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, so that what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, on the road by the sea across the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in the darkness have seen a great light, and for those who sat in the region of the shadow of death, light has dawned. From that time Jesus began to proclaim, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." As he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, in the boat with their father, Zebedee, mending their nets. And he called them. Immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Jesus went through Galilee, teaching in the synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness among the people. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. You may be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, when I was in 5th grade, I was in band, and my band teacher, I played euphonium, and the band teacher was clear to tell all the kids who were playing instruments, don't puff out your cheeks when you're playing. Of course, this applied to everyone, especially the brass instrument people, trumpet, trombone, tuba, euphonium, probably clarinet and flute. That would be a little weird for a flutist to... It didn't really matter. Drummers could do it as much as they wanted. Drummers don't need their cheeks. They can do whatever they want with their faces. But the proper technique for brass instruments is to not puff out your cheeks. That's what I was told. That's what I learned. But inevitably, in every young musician's life, despite how much they've learned, puffing out your cheeks is a bad thing, and hear how many times they hear from their teacher, don't do that. Eventually, you'll see a video of Dizzy Gillespie playing the trumpet, and you will think, my goodness, I've been lied to. For those of you who don't know, Dizzy Gillespie is one of the best band leaders and jazz trumpeters in history, and he famously puffs out his cheeks more than it looks like is humanly possible. He looks like one of those frogs with like inflatable cheek pouches. It looks like he intentionally stretched his cheeks to make them puff out larger. So if you're an elementary kid learning to play the trumpet and you watch a video of Dizzy Gillespie, your teacher has to tell you, don't do that, that's wrong. And yet there is no elementary school band teacher in the world who could play trumpet half as well as Dizzy could. The point being, Dizzy was technically wrong, but that did not stop him from being one of the best musicians in history. If you have no idea what that has to do with this gospel lesson, put that on a shelf. We're going to come back to that. So this gospel lesson is the famous passage where we get these words, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." You won't just be fishermen, you'll be fishers of men. Great tagline for Jesus' beginning ministry. He was calling fishermen, and he wanted to give them something relatable to hook them. I didn't intend that pun, honestly. But it really is a very interesting metaphor when we think about it. Because though what most of us think of fishing nowadays, as far as non-professional fishing, is very different from what Jesus would have known when he thought about fishing. But both metaphors actually work for thinking about ministry. I mean, if I'm going fishing, what I'm imagining is sitting on the shoreline with a fishing rod and hooking a worm onto a hook and casting the rod into the water and waiting until I feel a tug and then tugging back and starting to reel in. There's a little bit of a fight and you have a one-on-one battle with this fish and then you get it. And this actually works as a metaphor, even though that's not what Jesus was talking about. It works as a metaphor for ministry. Because what this is is being in a familiar place, a safe, comfortable place, the shore, and doing a one-on-one battle with a fish. This is, you meet a friend for coffee, and you say, hey, you should come check out my church sometime. You might like the pastor. He's young and funny. Not that anyone would say that here. But you should come to our Bible study, or come to a soup supper that we're having, or come do quilting with us. Whatever it happens to be, you invite a friend, and you get them to come to one event. That's the tug on the other end of the line. And you tug back, and you get them to come to another event. And then you start reeling them in. And maybe they go away for a while, but you keep encouraging them to come, and then 2 years later, they're the new church treasurer. You've got them. They're in now. The metaphor of fishing, modern fishing, works great for ministry. Of course, what Jesus was thinking about was a completely different process. They were on a boat, and to be clear, this is not the safe shoreline. If you fall off the boat, you might drown. This is a bit more dangerous. But they're casting a big net into the water. It's not a one-on-one battle with a single fish. It is trying to get as many fish in the net when you pull it at once as you can, and then dragging the net and pulling in the haul. This metaphor might look more like going somewhere outside of your comfort zone, a different town, a big city, somewhere maybe not exactly safe, a neighborhood that you might be a little afraid of, a prison, whatever it may be. You go to this place, and instead of having a one-on-one fight with one fish, you proclaim to everyone as well as you can and hope you can catch a few. That is also an effective form of ministry. Both kinds of fishing work really well. It is a really great metaphor, but there's another metaphor in here that's also interesting. James and John are mending their nets when Jesus calls them. If you haven't paid attention to that before, think about that, working that into the metaphor of fishing for people. If we as a church, we as individual Christians, are fishers of people, what does it mean to mend our nets? Maybe their nets were ineffective. They were broken in some places, and fish were slipping through. Maybe for us, mending our nets is taking a critical look at some of our failures, some of the places where our ministry isn't working, where people are slipping through, where we're not doing the job we need to do. Taking a critical, hard look at our weaknesses and trying to fix them. That is a useful metaphor. Maybe mending their nets isn't about what they're doing wrong, but it's because the nets are so effective that they've caught too many fish, and now the nets are starting to bend and tear in places, so they're strengthening the nets because of how successful they are. And that's also an issue that churches run into. Some churches get so many people, they don't know what to do with them. I'm sure many churches would be jealous of those churches. But there are some churches who get so many people, they're not really sure how to handle that. And they need to figure out a plan. They need to mend their nets to make sure everyone can be included and everyone can be involved. And so we can go ahead and think whatever we want as we walk away from here today, as far as what mending our nets means for us as a church and us individually. But there is one other thing about this net mending thing that's interesting, but you really have to pay attention to the details. So I invite you to join me as we get lost in the weeds together, as we find this one critical detail that we probably would have missed. So when Jesus calls Andrew and Peter, it specifically says Andrew and Peter left their nets. When Jesus calls James and John, it says they left their father and their boat. Matthew is clear to include that James and John had nets, they were working on them, they were mending them. But while Matthew specifically says that Andrew and Peter left their nets, Matthew doesn't say that James and John did. Maybe this is just an oversight. Maybe I'm reading into the details too much. That's completely possible. But maybe what Matthew is implying here is that James and John took their nets with them. Their broken, in need of mending nets. That's interesting. There's a lot of voices in our culture, especially in the age of the internet, where everyone is a self-help guru if you give them money. There are a lot of voices telling people, especially young people, how to better themselves, what they need to do to live their lives properly. And you've probably heard some of these things. One strain of thought in particular is interesting. It's this strain that suggests before you go out and help the world, you need to figure out yourself first. You have to have your own affairs set in order. Clean your room, as it were. Don't leave the boat until your nets are mended. Mend the nets, then follow Jesus. And while to some extent this advice is important, it is helpful to have a clean room. It just gives peace of mind. And making your bed as the first thing you do in the morning gives you a little accomplishment to start the day. It's a good thing. But the problem with this advice is the implication is that before you go out and help people, before you go out and try to change the world, it's not just making your bed and cleaning your room. It's completely getting your life together. And though not all of us would like to admit this, I suspect that if we were going to hold ourselves to the standard that before you go out and try to help the world, you need to get your life completely together, no one would ever go out and help the world. When I was young in my undergrad degree, I had this image of adulthood where adults were always 10 minutes early to everything, and they always answered their emails promptly, and they checked their mail, and they did all of the organizational, functional things that adults are supposed to do. And they always were on time to their commitments, and they never got anything confused, and they never double booked themselves, and they always had excellent organizational skills and were on top of things, and could go to a party and meet a new person without being socially awkward and uncomfortable, and they could make friends, and all of these incredible things. That was my idea of adulthood. And then two things happened. One, I met a lot of adults, and two, I became an adult, and I realized my ideas about adulthood were completely unfounded. When I think my first taste of this, in my undergrad, one of my professors started the semester by saying that her goal for the semester was to get better at checking her emails and responding on time. And now I realize that that is a daunting task, especially for a professor. But when I was in college, the image of a functional adult I had made me think that this wasn't even a big goal. This is exactly what she should have been doing all along. To be clear, this was not some undergrad who was trying to find herself. This is a professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln who is saying, I'm going to try to get better at checking my emails on time. And what's even more jarring about this is about 4 weeks into the semester, she had to give up that goal and reevaluate the whole thing. The emails were just too much. The truth is, while some of us may be excellent at checking our emails, if we're being honest, none of us have our lives completely together. We all make mistakes. And I'm not just suggesting we make 1 or 2 mistakes once in a while. I'm saying we consistently and chronically disappoint ourselves. That is what sin is. We consistently and chronically fail to do the right thing. Maybe we really struggle with the email thing. Maybe it's because we have not figured out the right work-life balance and we just are overworked or underworked all the time. Maybe we have a problem with diet and exercise where we cannot consistently keep to a plan and we always feel out of shape. Maybe it's an interpersonal thing. We always feel uncomfortable around new people and we can never figure out how to get over it. Maybe it's an emotional thing. We can't emotionally regulate. We get really stressed, and that makes us angry, and we don't know why we're getting angry, but all of a sudden we snap at people. All of these things happen to us. And if that list did not, those things that I listed did not include you, I suspect if you do some soul searching, you'll find your thing. You'll find your thing where you overshare or you undershare or you fail in one way or another. And you keep making the same mistake. If we're being honest, none of us have mended nets. We're all working on it. But none of us are ever done. So if we were going to hold ourselves to the standard that you don't go out and try to change the world, to try to help people, to try to fix things until your nets are mended, we would never get off the boat. We'd be stuck there, and Jesus would be walking along the shore to some other potential disciple. The truth is, James and John took their broken nets to follow Jesus. Maybe they mended them along the way. Maybe they figured out what they needed to do to fix the nets while they were hanging out with Jesus. And maybe at some point they threw them away because they realized the nets are not what they needed anymore. The fact is, the journey of following Jesus does not require us to be technically correct, fully functioning on every level. The journey to following Jesus doesn't mean we have to start by checking our emails effectively. It doesn't mean we have to start by making sure our cheeks stay not puffed when we play the trumpet. We can technically make mistakes, not have the correct form, not be exactly what is expected of who we're supposed to be, and still join the journey and follow Jesus. We might be an anxious mess. We might be terrible at making friends. We might talk way too much or way too little. But we can still start. And you might say, well, this is fine because we'll figure out how to do it along the way. But that might not be true either. Dizzy never stopped puffing his cheeks. And I'm sure my professor still struggles to keep up with her emails. I will continue failing at some things for the rest of my life, as I'm sure all of us will. It's not necessarily that we mend the nets along the way. It's that as we walk with Jesus, we come into contact with God's perfect love for an imperfect world. And in that space are transformed. We begin to see what perfection really means and how wrong we were about our standards before. We begin to see what it really means to be worthy to work for God's kingdom and to be worthy of God's love. And in this transformation, we realize that what we built ourselves up to be, what we were supposed to be in our imaginations, is not necessarily what God had imagined for us. We can let go of the nets that need mending and follow Jesus and learn who God is transforming us into. Thanks be to God. Amen. Come this cast a stare, should your life attract or scare, will you let me answer prayer in you and you in me? Will you let the blinded see if I but call your name? Will you set the prisoners free and never be the same? Will you kiss the leper clean and do such as this unseen, and admit to what I mean in you and you in me? Will you love the you hide if I but call your name? Will you quell the fear inside and never be the same? Will you use the faith you found to reshape the world around, through my sight and touch and sound in you and you in me? Lord, your summons echoes true when you but call my name. Let me turn and follow you and never be the same. In your company I'll go, where your love and footsteps show. Thus I'll move and live